to introduce Nick Ostheimer. He organized the ICE rally at FAU on Friday. He was a guest panelist for our New Generation of Activists meeting, if you so recall. He is the president of the FAU Democrats. And he will lead us for the Pledge of Allegiance and will be acknowledging the VIPs in the room. Nick, come on up.
Thank you, Myra. For the Pledge of Allegiance, please stand. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We'd like to extend a warm welcome to some VIP guests today. When I call your name, please stand up and we'll give you a short round of applause. State Representative Deborah Tendrich. Wilkeen Brutus, award-winning journalist for WLRN. Michael Gomez, president of the Palm Beach County High School Democrats. Helena Herrera, vice president of the Palm Beach County High School Democrats. Howard Richmond, chair of the Palm Beach County Democratic Executive Committee. And Fred Hadley, a reporter from the Village Sentry. All right, all set. Back to you, Myra.
Hi, everyone. I'm Myra, and I started Indivisible Boca Raton back in March. Because having been active in Indivisible in Connecticut during Trump's first term, I felt strongly that we needed a local chapter of Indivisible here in Boca. I am convinced it was the efforts of Indivisibles and other grassroots organizations across the country that resulted in the victory of Joe Biden. Indivisible is a nonpartisan organization that welcomes Democrats, Republicans, Independents, and NPAs who are motivated to join the resistance. Our mission is to elect leaders who reflect our values, rebuild our democracy, and to defeat the Trump agenda. This past month, we organized 2 rallies, once against the GEO Group and one against the Everglades Detention Center. Our August meeting, highlighting the strategies of a new generation of activists, was inspirational. We felt much more hopeful and positive about the future of our country after hearing these young activists speak. Speaking of positive messages, Robert Hubble had this in his newsletter last week. Referring to the special election in Iowa, he said, quote, "In a shocking upset that confirms Democrats' gut instinct that the momentum has shifted in their favor, Caitlin Dray flipped an Iowa State Senate seat, breaking the GOP supermajority in the Iowa legislature. She won the seat in a special election by a 55% to 44% margin in a district Trump carried by 11 percentage points. Pretty good. The better is what we see in the streets, town halls, and in special elections. Unquote. Indeed, Democrats have won nearly every competitive election since November 2024 as American voters are consistently rejecting Trump and the Republicans aligned with him at the polls. Iowa Senator Joni Ernst is taking this very seriously because she has decided not to run again in 2026. Indivisible Boca Raton will do everything we can to keep the momentum going. Next Monday, September 15th, we will be meeting here from 1 to 3 to write postcards for elections in New Jersey and Virginia, where there are 2 gubernatorial races that are extremely important. We'll provide the postcards, addresses, and refreshments, and you provide the postage. Our next meeting will be on October 15th. Please note, this is a Wednesday, not our usual Monday because of the holidays. The topic of the evening will be, how are RFK Jr.'s policies impacting our health, and what can we do to protect ourselves? A panel of medical professionals will be educating and guiding us through the confusion. We are now members of the National Visibility Brigade. We will be protesting during rush hour on bridges and overpasses. We are currently seeking the best overpass location that has parking close by. Please see me with your suggestions. I hope somebody comes up with something good. Saturday, October 18th, is another National Protest Day. No Kings 2.0. We will be protesting at the Boca Raton City Hall from 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. We have many committees that you can join to make a difference and make new like-minded friends. Please sign up after the meeting. Calling all bakers. Our cookie and cake fundraiser will take place at the October 15th meeting. Please see James and Georgette to volunteer. And t-shirts are still available. For a minimum donation of just $20, you can be the proud owner of our beautiful Broken Heart t-shirt that looks great to wear at our rallies and meetings. Please see Linda and Bonnie. I want to take this opportunity to thank my esteemed colleagues who make Indivisible Boca Raton possible. I'd love you all to stand when your name is called. We have Bonnie Miller, and we have, here's Bonnie, Linda Rosenthal, Michael Gavigan, Susan Brees, Susan Meltzer, Jay Morris, our social media expert, Jack, our IT expert, and our hospitality chairs, James and Georgette. Yay! Frankie, the chair of voter outreach. Michael, the media chair. And Barbara, the chair of the Immigration Committee of South Palm Beach County Indivisible. They are working with all the Indivisibles in Palm Beach County. To everyone volunteering on these committees, your diligence is greatly appreciated. But I also want to thank you, our members, who come out to our meetings even when the rain is torrential. And despite the heat and humidity, protest with great enthusiasm at our rallies. With your dedication and persistence, we will continue to fight for our rights, for our values, and for our democracy. I now have the pleasure of introducing Senator Tina Polsky. 2020, where she represents the 30th District. She serves as the policy chair for the Senate Democratic Caucus. She serves in 9 committees in the Senate. Prior to her election, she served for 2 years in the Florida House of Representatives for the 81st District. She is passionately active in civic and charitable affairs. She serves on the Anti-Defamation League's regional board and the board of the Jewish Community Center. She graduated from the University of Pennsylvania and got her law degree from Columbia University. Please welcome Senator Tina Polsky.
Thank you, Myra. Thank you, everyone, for coming out. This is such a big crowd, considering the weather. We so appreciate it because we know you are just aching for a change and you wanted to hear the person that I've endorsed for our next governor, David Jolly. I promise you will not be disappointed. I want to especially thank the young people who are here. I love seeing the next generation of these events. So thank you so much for coming out. I'm just going to very briefly introduce David, and then he's going to give you his, as we call it, an elevator speech, which is excellent. I've heard it. You all know him from MSNBC. He's an incredible contributor. He was a congressman. He's a lawyer. He's a father. He's a husband. And he's going to be our next governor of the state of Florida. I'd like to welcome David Jolly to the stage. Thank you for coming to South Palm Beach County.
Thank you, Tina. Thank you, everyone. Listen, I got to tell you, if it's possible to be fierce and kind, that's your state senator. You got a real special one here. I've also gotten the opportunity to get to know your state representative, Deborah Tindrick. Listen, I called Deborah. I said, we haven't met, but I want to get to know you. She said, okay, I got to warn you, I'm a little bit of a different politician. And she was absolutely right. She's effective. She's super effective. Listen, I heard Tina mention thank you to the young people. I'm looking around. She might have been talking about me. And I'm 52. So I come from, oh no, there's a bunch back here. There's a bunch back here. All right, good. So listen, I'm going to give you a brief bio, but I'm going to jump ahead. I'm a preacher's kid. I'm a person of deep Christian faith. I don't say that to evangelize, and I leave my personal faith at the State House steps. I recognize that, But growing up, we would always have these high attendance days and these days where you figured who was oldest, who was youngest, who would whatever. I'm going to ask if anybody in this room is less than 10 years old tonight. Because if not, I want to recognize Mason Podvin, who is 10 years old and here at the Indivisible Boca meeting. Mason, give us a wave, buddy. So look, just a very short bio on me, and then I want to tell you why I'm in this race and why I know we can win. So my wife and I live in Pinellas County, over in the Clearwater, St. Pete area. I was born in Pinellas. I lived down in South Miami for about 10 or 12 years. I lived back in Pasco. I lived in Pensacola. I have a pretty good cultural understanding of and can navigate the state fairly well. My wife and I have a 6-year-old and a 4-year-old. 6-year-old and a 4-year-old. Every day's a Monday. Every day's a Monday. Every day's a Monday. You all know that. But this is very much a lived experience for my wife and I. And I will tell you, it's an unusual thing to be committed to the state of Florida and running for the governorship and knowing we can bring change, but wondering almost in real time, is it a state where it is responsible to raise your children? It's a real question, right? That's the moment in history we're living through. There is an opportunity to change the world in this cycle. There's an opportunity to change the world. Our daughter, at 6 years old, didn't quite understand what running for governor means. She still doesn't. Obviously, we try to keep our kids a little bit protected from the politics of this, but when she started to understand, wait a minute, Daddy's going to run for governor, what does that mean? I was reading to her in bed one night and she started crying. She started crying. It was real, folks. It was real. And she said, Daddy, I don't want you to run for governor. And I said, why? 6 years old. She said, because I don't want you to be Donald Trump. Think about that. Think about that. I assured her I wasn't going to be. but think about that. At 6 years old, her impression of politics is the toxicity that we're all living through. And as we kind of backed it out and broke it down, ultimately what I said to her then, and I continue to say to our kids when they have questions, look, sweetie, if you have a chance to change the world, you take it. If you have a chance to change the world, you take it. That's what we are all doing right now in this moment. We all have to do what's within reach. What's within reach. For some, it's doing the No Kings rally. For some, it's registering to vote. For some, it's just committing to vote. For others, it is participating in Indivisible or in your local DEC or in a college Democratic group. It's changing hearts and minds. For some, it's the opportunity to be on the ballot, like Senator Polsky or Representative Tendrich or myself. This is a moment where we all have to stand up and do what's within reach. We have an historic opportunity in the state of Florida to win the governorship in 2026. I promise you that's the case. I have no interest in leading our family through the next 18 months for a race that can't be won. I'm just going to say that to you very selfishly, right? Given the age of our kids, the commitment it takes to win the governorship. But I know as a state, not as David Jolly, as a state, we can demand and bring change next November. This is a cycle unlike any other. We'll talk a little bit more about that tonight, maybe as we go through Q&A. But I want to talk to you about what this race is about, what my politics are about, what this campaign is about, and what I hope the state looks to in this governor's race. I see three fundamental values that the Democratic Party that I am proud to be a member of represents, okay? Three values that are our state values, are our national values, but that we've gotten away from. First, the economy should work for everyone, everybody. Not just the wealthiest among us, but people from all walks of life. That's not to condemn success. We should encourage success. But we need to make sure the economy works for everyone. For the lowest wage earner, for the person who's lost their job, for the young person trying to get started in the state of Florida, we should make sure the economy is fair and works for everybody. The second value is the government actually has a role in our lives. It's our government, we pay for it, and at times we really need it. A government that provides services to our seniors, to our veterans, to our storm victims, to families in need of excellence in public education, to families in need of safe communities, in need of public transportation, workforce housing. The government has a role in our lives. So first, the economy should work. Second, the government should serve. And the third value is the most basic of all, but heartbreakingly we've gotten away from. We should be a state, we should be a country where everyone is welcomed and celebrated, regardless of the color of your skin, regardless of where you were born, regardless of who you love or who you worship. Those are our values as Democrats, but those are our values as a society, and frankly, values that have been under attack from the pro-values party, whatever that party seems to market itself as now. Those are the values that we use in this race to amplify the Democratic Party to a community bigger than just our own party. Math is math, folks. As Democrats, we accept math and science and data and vaccines and public health and everything else, right? There are not enough Democratic voters in the state of Florida to elect a governor by ourselves. We have to amplify our message to independents and to Republican voters. But if we start by talking about our values, what does that mean? It means that in the midst of an affordability crisis that's hitting every community, every Republican, Independent, Democrat, Pensacola, Miami, Jacksonville, Tampa, Orlando, our rural communities, the cost of housing, access to housing is too expensive and unaffordable. We have a homeowners insurance market that has collapsed. We have a property tax system that is an impediment to first-time home buyers. We have transportation costs going through the roof because we have failed to invest in public and multimodal transportation. We have utility costs going up because we deny climate change, we didn't prepare for it, and we don't allow clean and renewable energies into our utility infrastructure. We have an affordability crisis in the state of Florida that Democrats have an answer to and Republicans don't. Republicans in Tallahassee have created this. Secondly, what does it look like for the government to actually serve its people? Sure, we need to be there for storm victims. We need to be there for our seniors. We need to be there, most importantly, though, with public education. With public education. There's probably no greater impact that government can have in a family's life than to provide for excellence in accessible public education. And yet it's been under attack for over 20 years by Republicans in Tallahassee. Still today, the greatest access to excellence in education is in our public schools, not our voucher schools. But it's in our public schools out of the sheer will, commitment, and love of our teachers and our administrators, not because of Republican politicians. It is a moral wrong that our teachers are paid last in the nation. Last in the nation. We need a 10-year renaissance in public education in the state of Florida. We need a 30% increase in teacher pay. We need historic investments in infrastructure, create platforms for the future of learning in our public education environment. We need to create public education spaces that Florida's families want to rush into. Right now, our voucher system is providing and funding environments, not education. And there are enough families who have said, wait a minute, I'm looking for a local public school, but in my community, it's been defunded. And if I follow this voucher into a voucher school, they're taking the voucher, but they're charging me an extra $6,000 or $7,000 or $8,000. If my first grade kid can't read, they're not providing an IEP for that kid, they're kicking them out. If my kid wants to pursue the trades or the arts or excellence in academics, they're not providing that either. Folks, if a private school takes a voucher, they should have to provide the same services, standards, curriculum, and testing that our public schools do. Why? Why? Not to just attack a school that's a partner to Florida's families, but to improve the outcome for Florida's families who are following Florida's education policy into what they think is a trusted environment. The economy can work for everybody when we start to attack the cost of housing, of utilities, of transportation. The government can serve its people when we have a renaissance in public education in the state of Florida. And frankly, the last value is very simple. We make this a place where everyone is welcomed and celebrated and lifted up by ending the culture wars on day one of a new governorship. We stop attacking the franchise and suffrage of communities of color. We expand early voting, access to the ballot box. We let teachers teach. We bring back the books. We recognize that everyone in this state is welcome. And I'm going to close with this. I mentioned my faith at the beginning. I grew up a preacher's kid in the 70s, a Southern Baptist preacher's kid. You can write that book, okay? You can imagine how conservative that environment is. I don't bring that in my politics. I say that for one very specific reason in this era of culture wars. I want our 6-year-old and 4-year-old who today attend a relatively conservative church. I want our family to be exposed to the greatest diversity of culture and academics and life and ethnicity and love that they can, because it makes them stronger, better, more empathetic, more capable humans, capable of determining their own lives, being stronger, better contributors to our society. I'm not threatened by diversity. I think we should celebrate diversity. We can orient our family around the values that we decide are right for our family and prepare them to make their own decisions when they reach the age of majority. And God bless us all, every family and every individual in the state of Florida should have that liberty and that right to do so. But under Ron DeSantis, that's simply not the case. The culture wars end on day one when we change the governorship. We're going to have a conversation with some questions and answers to engage in as much conversation as you all wish tonight. I apologize I didn't get here early. I think everybody who drove through the lightning, your hair's probably still standing up. We've all been through storms. I'm not sure I've been through an electrical storm like this one in a long, long time. Thank you for being here this evening. One thing we're going to cover tonight is how we win. Because we don't get to do any of this if we don't win, but we can win the governorship next November. Thank you for being a part of this.
Okay, hi. That was great, David. Thank you so much for being here. I'm going to ask him some questions, going to moderate a little bit here, and then we're going to open it up to audience questions. So if we don't cover it, keep it in your mind, and then you can come up here and ask questions at the end, and we'll try to move this along so there's plenty of time for all of you to ask your questions. So let me start with the first one. The big topic this week, as everyone knows, is the announcement that the governor and the Surgeon General, my favorite person, want to end vaccine requirements for school children. You responded immediately. Can you tell us your position on these vaccine requirements, and how do you think this issue will play in this gubernatorial race?
Fire the Surgeon General. Fire the Surgeon General. And I don't know if you've noticed, but go look at the senator's feed, because she actually questioned him on this during the confirmation hearing, and I believe he said that he saw no reason to change the current construct, right? He's a liar. He's a liar. They're chasing extreme MAGA politics, and they're willing to risk the lives of Florida's families to do it. It's wrong. Look, in a very basic way, let's balance the conversation about personal liberty and public health, because each of those are powerful conversations. We should work for the greatest amount of personal liberty. It's the foundation of how the nation was founded, right? We broke from a crown that suggested liberty came from the monarchy, and we suggested that we each had a certain basic liberty. Whether you believe that that was divinely given or what Jefferson called the natural rights of man, that's at the foundation of who we are as a people. That is why we have currently a religious exemption to our vaccine requirements, why we allow exemptions for medically compromised based on a doctor's decision. And it is also why the mandate only occurs once you enter into the education system, into the public environment. We have a role at the same time where we protect personal liberties to provide for public safety and public health. That's why we have traffic laws. That's why we have gun laws. That's why we have building codes. And that's why we have vaccine requirements. It's called public health for a reason. And we also know that the efficacy has been driven by science, and that it is really not been questioned for generations, but for in very specific areas where science can continue to chase certain questions. But we know its universal contribution to public health, to personal health, to keeping the state of Florida safe. I do think what the Surgeon General is doing is dangerous, but most importantly, he serves at the leisure of Ron DeSantis. This is Ron DeSantis' problem. This is now Casey DeSantis' problem, because apparently she was appointed to lead this new MAHA committee. How it sounds like ha-ha a little bit, but this is the lieutenant governor's problem, Jay Collins, who may run for governor himself. This is Byron Donalds' problem when he backed it. This is Paul Renner's problem when he backed it. And I don't know if you saw what happened, but when all these Republicans started lining up, terrified that they had to agree with this, who pulled the rug out from underneath them? Donald Trump. This was too crazy for Donald Trump. Fire the Surgeon General. If Ron DeSantis won't do that, help elect me governor and I will.
Just to give a little background for those of you who don't live and breathe Florida politics like we do, Byron Donalds and Paul Renner are both running in the Republican primary right now. They're vying to be David Jolly's opponent. Jay Collins, who's the newly appointed lieutenant governor, may also run. He's kind of in the DeSantis camp, so there's all these divisions, which should be very interesting and I think very beneficial. For us,
More the merrier.
Let them spend the money.
All we need is Matt Gaetz now. Bring in Matt Gaetz.
But I think that's actually a really important point, that we don't want David Jolly to have a primary. I've decided I think he's the right person. Let's not have a primary. And you know what's so beautiful? He's chosen to be a Democrat. That's what I love about it. Okay, next topic. We are getting to the heart of hurricane season, and insurance costs are always top of mind for everyone. How would you address the insurance costs if elected governor?
We need a state catastrophic fund for hurricane coverage in the state of Florida. Let me show you what that looks like. And listen, I'm not somebody, I realize we have a lot of different opinions on the role of government, on what our economy should look like. I'm in a very post-ideological space. You're going to hear me talk about some things tonight that you might say, wow, that seems out there on the left, or wow, it sounds like he still has some right of center convictions. I just want big solutions to big problems, because we got really big problems in the state of Florida. The problem on homeowners insurance is the private market has collapsed in natural disaster states, and it's not coming back. You can argue rightly that we've ignored climate change for too long, and that the impact of climate change has driven up costs for private insurance to cover homeowner losses in windstorms. I think that's true. It's true of fire in California, Tornado Alley in the Midwest. The bottom line is there is not a private market for homeowners insurance that is any longer affordable for Florida's families. And where private markets fail, I think the government has a role to step in. What does that mean? A truly funded state catastrophic fund that removes hurricane coverage from the private market will cut your homeowner's insurance by 60 or 70%. 60 or 70%. It's called X-Wind. Call your insurance broker and say, hey, could you price my policy without wind coverage? The reason very few of us ever have the opportunity to buy that is because our mortgage company naturally requires us to have all perils covered, including hurricane and wind. Now, listen, we also get to be honest as Democrats talking about math and revenue. We have to fund that hurricane fund, the CAT fund. There are several ways to do it. I'll give you a couple of examples, but ultimately I think what we do is we put the question in front of Florida's voters. We basically have three industries in the state of Florida that are the huge drivers: tourism, construction, and agriculture. Okay, critically important, all three of those critically important to the state of Florida. Right now, we bring in so much money in tourist development tax dollars, but we have restricted how we're allowed to spend it. By law, about 40% of it has to go to further advertise tourism outside of Florida. Right? Posters on the Chicago L in the middle of a snowstorm where you see Clearwater beaches and you say, I want to buy a ticket on a Legion airline and fly to Florida. That's a good thing, right? I'm not knocking that. But when we have a state crisis in insurance, when we have a state crisis in funding for public education, folks, we don't have a crisis of convention centers in the state of Florida. We have plenty of tourism development tax money that is available for use, and I think Florida's families and voters could responsibly say, for the next 10 years, do we want to approve a certain amount of our tourist development tax money to go to a state catastrophic fund for insurance, or to go to public education? What might we do there? One other way you could fund a state catastrophic fund is simply require our insurance companies and Florida corporations, are you ready, to keep their profits in state and tax them on it. It's called combined reporting. Right now, let me tell you the giveaway for Florida's insurance companies. You get to come in as an undercapitalized insurance company. You keep your losses here. You send your profits out of state. You deny 50% of the claims. You pay your CEOs $25, $50 million. And then when the big storm hits, you cry poor and you leave. Well, I think that's wrong. And I think if we said we're going to tax your profits in state, guess what? We actually could generate $2.5 or $3 billion a year that could go into a state catastrophic fund. Let's be very responsible because we're getting into the year of campaigning where there's fact checking. I think it could take us 3 years to fund a state CAT fund. I don't think we can provide coverage in year one. We have to do this in a very actuarially sound way. But if we responsibly set up a state catastrophic fund that can purchase reinsurance on, frankly, the international market, and we build up a corpus of $30 to $35 billion, we can remove hurricane coverage from the private market, reduce homeowners insurance in the state of Florida by 60 or 70%, and be the model for natural disaster states around the country.
That's great to hear some real ideas, because in Tallahassee, we haven't done really anything since 2022, when we completely focused on tort reform and making it harder for consumers to go after the insurance company. That was their solution. Because the insurance companies cry poverty. But as David just explained, that's not really the case. It was kind of a corporate subterfuge that was going on. So it's so refreshing to hear some real ideas. So speaking of insurance, healthcare costs are a big concern in Florida, especially as the federal government debates Medicare and ACA coverage. What can and should be done in Florida to expand coverage so that we have more Floridians covered with what's could be coming down from the federal government?
Florida should expand Medicaid like 40 other states have done. It's very simple. The formulas are so beneficial to the state and to Florida's families, and it improves and increases health outcomes and ultimately reduces costs to the Treasury. We should expand Medicaid. Depending on your generation, your walk of life, Medicaid meant something or something to one generation, different to another, whatever it might be. It certainly did for me growing up. It was the public health department down by the high school, and frankly, it was not the service provider for most families. That's different now. Medicaid provides over 40% of coverage for childbirth care and for labor care and for postpartum care. Frankly, Medicaid is the largest bill payer for what we could essentially call end-of-life care, skilled nursing care, memory care, where individuals and families have spent down all of their assets and have nothing left. Medicaid is the bill payer for that health care provision. And Medicaid is a provider for Florida's families who financially can't afford the cost of health insurance. So I'm kind of sick and tired of the pro-life party opposing Medicaid and opposing subsidizing childbirth care and quality end-of-life care and family care for children. That's what the Medicaid program does. We should expand Medicaid in the state of Florida. I also think once we unlock that, we shouldn't be timid to look at how other states have set up state-based exchanges. If the federal exchange is going to start to fray and become more expensive and not actually cover all the families, let's at least explore what a state-based exchange looks like. When I mentioned that I think the government has a role to step in where private markets fail, I probably would wish, if we could wish everything, maybe we would wish that the private market was most efficient and cheapest and had universal service and could cover everybody and it worked. Well, it doesn't. It doesn't. And so just like in property insurance, it's true in health insurance and other industries, the government has a role now to step in because the cost of health care is simply out of reach for too many Floridians. I don't care what Republicans want to call it, but I call it affordable access to health care for Florida's families who need it. Maybe it's through Medicaid, maybe it's through a state exchange, but we frankly need leaders to say, we've tried it your way long enough, now we're going to try it a new way.
Thank you. Switching topics. Just these past few weeks, we have once again seen shootings at schools across the country. We're just a few miles from the Parkland tragedy. As governor, what can you do?
Work with Tina Polsky. Work with Tina Polsky. No, I mean that. Tina, thank you for your leadership on this issue as well. I'm always careful when we get on this topic because it's an area where my anger sometimes takes over and maybe I'm less disciplined in my words and maybe that's okay. We need to radically revisit our gun violence prevention legislation in the state of Florida. We do. And what's most radical of all is turning on Republicans and saying, what are you going to do about it? Because we have a lot of proposals and a lot of solutions. And it's not good enough for Republicans to simply say no. When kids are getting shot in schools, when you go to your synagogue or your place of worship, there are new security procedures because you've become targets of gun violence. When you're afraid to go to Walmart or to the grocery store. Look, we have to have this conversation maybe in a new way, or maybe just take the political hit of leading with courage on this and saying it's okay if we're not going to win every vote on this. But we need to dramatically change our direction in the state of Florida. What does that look like? We need universal and comprehensive background checks in the country, but certainly here in the state of Florida. We don't have them. We don't have them. And what I'm about to say, and I will say this again at the end, nothing I'm proposing is going to take a firearm away from a responsible gun owner. Nothing. Nothing. But a responsible gun owner can responsibly abide by state laws that prevent mass murders and mass shootings. We basically have a criminal conviction background check right now. All right, you go down, you buy a gun at Walmart, it takes you 60 seconds because we see, has this person ever been arrested and convicted? And if not, here's your gun. It's not good enough. It's not good enough. I'm going to give you a real-life example articulated by a conservative Republican sheriff post-Parkland who is trying to help address gun violence prevention. a domestic violence situation in a home. I'm just going to use husband-wife as a scenario. Forgive me. Husband beating his wife, the police show up, no charges are brought, the wife doesn't want to cooperate with the witness statement, the police leave. It happens a second time. It happens a third time. It happens a fourth time. The fifth time, the husband goes down to Walmart, buys a gun, comes home, and shoots his wife and kills her. Because nothing in the background check showed that there had been law enforcement intervention at that property as a result of that wife beater. It is okay to say we should change our Florida laws to ensure that a wife-beating murderer can't buy a gun on demand in a Walmart. That's okay to say that. And as a responsible gun owner, it's okay to say, you know what, I would prefer that that woman gets to live another day because my background check will come back clean no matter how much you want to check on me. That's fine. We can do that. Look, I think we can look at the size of clips. We can look at background checks on significant ammunition purchases. That's legislation that's been in front of the legislature for a while. There is so much more we can do, but we have to take this message, frankly, to the gun community and say, if we succeed at this, we're going to protect your kids and your grandkids just like we're going to protect ours. Sometimes it is hard, and I agree, sometimes it is hard for me to reach out to someone that has fully embraced gun culture simply because I haven't, right? I come from a family where gun ownership and hunting was there among some aunts, yeah, I guess some aunts too, aunts, uncles, cousins, that's fine, but I wasn't immersed in gun culture. It's not something that I have a natural reflex to, but I do understand that the Second Amendment certainly needs to provide for that protection, and that for a hobbyist, a hunter, you have absolutely every right to exercise that freedom and to enjoy that hobby and to own and use that firearm. I just think the access point of the firearm purchase is an area that we need to dramatically focus in on and say, how do we do better to save lives? It's not good enough for Republicans to say there are no answers, because what that means is that we are willing to accept the death of children to protect the gun lobby's view of the Second Amendment. I guess the last thing I would say on this, as an attorney, where we have been fooled as a society, is to suggest that the Second Amendment is an absolute right. It is not. It's a fundamental right. It's a fundamental right, just like our First Amendment is a fundamental right. Speech, press, assembly. The right to firearm ownership is a fundamental right. But no fundamental right is an absolute right. Speech is curtailed. You can't walk into a movie theater and yell fire. Assembly is curtailed. We can't go stand in the middle of the intersection unless you deliberately want to get arrested for disturbing the peace. Even press has limits when it comes to libel, slander, and others. They're all fundamental rights, but they're not absolute rights. Firearm ownership is not an absolute right. It is not an absolute right. It is a fundamental right. I will defend it. But I apologize for going on this. I told you I lose my discipline a little bit on this. It's wrong. It's wrong. It is wrong that we have allowed this to happen. It's wrong that we've allowed it to go on. It's why I appreciate Tina's leadership, and it's why if Florida's voters demand change next November, then we get to lead the state in a new direction of gun violence prevention.
I appreciate that. What is your position on using state police as immigration enforcement? And I guess any comments on, kind of the position that the hardline position DeSantis has taken in our infamous alligator Alcatraz?
So there's not a lot a new governor can do on their very first day. If politicians could honor promises on day one, the Ukraine war would be over, right? But I think there are a few things you can do, because Ron DeSantis opened Alligator Alcatraz by signing an emergency order to take that land from Miami-Dade County, and I bet the next governor could rescind that emergency order and lead to the closure of Alligator Alcatraz. And we should close the detention center in the Everglades. We absolutely should. Here's something I hope this governor's race can contribute to the national conversation. I think Republicans nationally, Republican leaders, I wouldn't say all, but Republican leaders, including the president and Ron DeSantis, have been fighting communities, not fighting crime. And it's wrong and it's ugly. They're attacking the immigrant community because they're attacking the immigrant community, not because they're attacking crime. We know there is a statistically higher rate of property and violent crimes among native-born communities than immigrant communities. Violent crimes by a rate of 2 to 1 or 3 to 1, property crimes by 2 to 1, some variation thereof. When it comes to whether or not local law enforcement should cooperate with ICE, I can tell you this, one of the things the governor needs to do is stop telling local law enforcement how to keep their communities safe. I don't think the state of Florida needs to require any agreements of our local law enforcement. Trust local law enforcement to know best how to keep their communities safe. Does that mean chasing guns, chasing sex crimes, chasing gangs, chasing immigration, illegal immigration? Does it mean actually investing in crime prevention programs for young men and young women to once and for all be able to see opportunity within their community instead of turning to crime? Trust local law enforcement, many of them elected, to actually determine what's the right way to police their communities. But here's why I think these agreements are fundamentally wrong and why we may see a court case coming in the next week or so on this. I just think we are desperately in need of a municipal leader to stand up and say, I'm not signing this, and I'm going to test it in court. And here's how you do it. I think you counter-propose these agreements in two areas. The first is most important. For law enforcement to say, we are not going to cooperate this without a provision acknowledging that our law enforcement officers will not engage in the violation of due process rights of the individual. Unless, as a state agency or a local law enforcement agency, unless we can be assured that we're not being asked to engage in the violation of individual due process, then we are not allowed to actually participate in some of these ICE raids. And already what you're seeing in some communities, the way around it, that chiefs and sheriffs are doing, is they're saying, okay, ICE, we will generally provide a secure neighborhood environment. We'll secure the perimeter while you go do whatever it is you're going to do, but we're not going to participate in it. Or they will agree to provide transportation of a detained individual, but they won't hold them. Literally, a police chief told me, we have told ICE, we will provide transportation of an individual to our department and hold them for 60 minutes. And if federal officials aren't there to accept detention, then we're letting that person go because we're not engaging in the detention of an individual. But I think it comes down to resetting this conversation about crime and immigration. Listen, we should be a state that is tough on crime. We should be a nation that has a strong immigration policy. Tall walls but wide gates. We should be a state that is tough on crime. That means if you were born here, if you immigrated here from Cuba, Venezuela, Haiti, New York, Ohio, or frankly, if you're a politician who steals $10 million from the Medicaid program, if you break the law, we can be a state that holds you accountable. But we can be a state that welcomes the immigrant and welcomes their contribution to our economy and to our culture. Listen, this isn't the first time we've faced this. We know the dark chapters of immigration throughout American history, but right here in Florida. Now look, I mentioned I grew up in Miami. I was in Miami during the 70s and 80s, the Mariel boat lift. I was in Miami as we saw this huge influx of Cuban refugees. The church that my father pastored went from being a traditional English-speaking Christian church to having bilingual services, and there was this incredible explosion of culture and diversity and language. But the Cuban refugee was not universally accepted for many of you who lived through that. There were bumper stickers that said, well, the last American to leave Miami, please take the flag. That was language being used, merchandise being sold. We're doing this again. We actually housed Cuban refugees in the Orange Bowl behind a chain link fence. That happened. That happened. Jimmy Carter, Bob Graham, Mayor Ferrer of Miami were wrestling with how to solve this. The politics were a little dicey, were a little tricky. Jimmy Carter came down for what was going to be a day where the solution was provided and we saw federal leadership. Bob Graham was participating, and respectfully, Jimmy Carter blinked. He blinked. And he got back on the plane, he went back to Washington without a solution. And it left Mayor Ferrer holding the bag, needing to answer to the Miami community, what are we going to do next? And he finally says, if we don't welcome the refugee, we might as well throw the Statue of Liberty into the East River. that's where we are again. And in some places, it's just a conversation about who we are as a people and who we want to be as a people. You know, we all know the great Colossus, the sonnet that is carved on the Statue of Liberty. We learned, bring me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to be free. We can recite it. The lines that come just before that, for some reason, we never learn. We never learn. The lines before that say, keep, O ancient lands. That means keep old world countries, keep your storied pomp. Keep your rich, your famous, your fabulous. Send me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to be free. The next line, your homeless, your wretched refuse, tossed upon the shore. Behold, I lift my lamp by this golden door. That was a moment in American history where the Supreme Court had just said, immigration is now a matter of federal policy, not state policy. We can't have a patchwork of different states. What are we going to be? Who are we going to be on the question of immigration? And Emma Lazarus was then asked to pen a sonnet that would be appropriate for this new beacon. And frankly, the first verse says that for us, our symbol is not an ancient Greek god. It is a humble woman standing in a harbor with a light. It's okay to say we can lead the world with compassion by welcoming the immigrant, provide home to the refuge. Frankly, to consider myself part of the church hurt community that doesn't understand the direction that the Christian church has gone with much of its politics. We can be a state and a nation that represents some of the most fundamental faith teachings, all faiths, right? Love, joy, respect, dignity. Frankly, some of the foundational behaviors of our atheists and agnostics who exercise love and charity in some ways far greater than our faith communities. We can decide that's who we are as a nation and as a people, and we can do it without apology. I just think what we've seen in these culture wars and the wars on the immigrant community is a moral wrong at the hands of Ron DeSantis and Donald Trump. And I apologize for the long answer, but we get a chance to change.
Good evening. Thank you for coming in this horrible weather. As a 77-year-old living in South Florida, I've become a single-issue candidate, and that issue is health. And one of the greatest impacts on the health of Floridians is the pre-harvest burning of sugar. Now, I've been on this subject, as Tina will tell you, for many, many years, and it doesn't seem to be making any progress. A few years ago, Senator Abruzzo partnered with a law firm to sue, and then the Florida governor said that it's against the law to do anything against agriculture. So we're still breathing in horrible, toxic poisons from roughly November through May. If you're elected, I should say when you're elected governor, what will you do to stop these pre-harvest burns? And have you accepted any money from any of the sugar growers? Thank you.
The answer on the second is I have not, and I imagine they're not going to give me any money either. Because I will be an ally of yours and I will work with you both to protect health, to protect the environment, and frankly to bring back home rule. And where municipalities where municipalities take certain actions and efforts on behalf of the environment and on behalf of the public health of their communities, I think it's wrong for the governor and for the legislature to override home rule. Look, there's a column in the Washington Post today by the mayor of Coral Gables who, listen, to his credit, talks about some of the green initiatives of Coral Gables. We should encourage that. I don't want to slight him for that leadership. But he actually suggests that Republican gains in the state of Florida are because Republicans have become a pro-environmental party. I think you just gave us example one of why not. They have allowed this. They have favored ag, they have favored polluters, they have favored developers, they have failed to protect clean air and clean water. One of the things I get most excited about on day one, now it all can't happen on day one, but it can start. We get to start firing all of Ron DeSantis' appointees. That means to the Public Service Commission that regulates our utilities, to our clean water, or to our water boards, to our state university systems. Listen, I think what we know is the giveaway to sugar and the lack of preservation. It is one thing to provide money for Everglades restoration. It is a different thing to try to prevent its pollution. And I think Republicans have been good to lead with providing resources and finances for restoration. But boy, we won't have as much to restore if we stop destroying it. And so consider me an ally in protecting the everglades.
So my question is not as brilliant as that. Sorry, it's a little bit different. As the mom of a 17-year-old about to graduate from Stoneman Douglas, I live in the Parkland area. We've lived there for 12 years, so we've lived there a really long time. And although, we weren't directly affected by the tragedy, we were directly affected. Like, people don't understand that when you live in that community and you drove by that building every day, and when my son was about to go to Stoneman, and everybody said to me, "Why are you sending him there?" And I didn't want to taint him with anything. So I said, "Well, how do you feel about it? Do you feel safe?" Because he was young, and I figured that was a pretty innocuous question. And he said, "I feel safe, but it's not like anybody's going to come and help us." And that broke my heart, because I always feel like I tell my son the truth, depending on the age. And he doesn't even want to go to a university in Florida now. What do I, just as an individual and a mom, this is a bigger question, and someone who's just working every day, right, and trying to make a difference, I feel like I don't have the power to do anything, right? So how do you feel like we have the power we have the power to mobilize, and we have the power, but how do we really have the power to make a difference? Because I just see all of our rights slipping away. What would you suggest for the ordinary person who's just trying to make it through the day? What do you suggest?
Yeah, I love this question, because I'm going to speak very earnestly that I believe you're doing it right now. And I know, listen, I mean this. Look, we all came out of November flatlined, right? My wife and I certainly did. As I mentioned, running for governor, wrestling with whether or not Florida is actually the right state to raise your kids is a real question.
That's why I wanted to touch on that.
And what happened in the start of the year, we saw this resurgence of activism. But then what happened following that is we started to see the data that resulted from that. Our congressional special elections in the spring moved by 15 and 16 points towards Democratic leadership. This past week in Orlando, a state Senate and state House race moved by 20 and 21 points towards Democratic leadership. I believe by the end of this week, we are going to learn that the governor's race is neck and neck, okay? It is because of what each one of you are doing right now. It is because you didn't give up. I mean that. It is because you didn't give up. And even when it feels like it's out of reach, we're in a moment where it's actually within reach. Now, I want to, on the very specific issue of Parkland, here's one of the reasons we've got to win, folks. Our voucher program currently funds environments, not education. It does. The voucher schools provide wonderful environments. Ballistic glass, security officers, small classrooms, lockdown procedures. Our public schools do a lot of that as well, but the funding has to make its way through all of our campuses. The fact is, we need a renaissance in funding for our public school environment, including not just raising teacher pay from dead last to a 30% pay raise, but infrastructure hardening as well. A lot has been done. Frankly, Tina has helped lead in a lot of this space, but so much more can be done, because we all come from different walks of life, different ages, and I realize that my experience is shared by some, but not by all, but it sounds like yours is a variation on a theme. When we took our daughter to do her kindergarten tour, I was captivated by the red light drills and the signs and the lockdowns. When I was in Seminole County last week, I visited 3 schools, and one of the schools, every room has about 10% of the floor painted blue, and that's where every kid runs if there's a school shooting, because it's the safest part of the classroom where a shooter couldn't reach them. That's the environment. When we did that tour with our kindergarten girl, We took her to a big girl lunch, right? It was pre-K. She's 4 years old. We took her to Columbia. I came home and I was doing live TV with Nicole Wallace and Uvalde broke out. And I'm looking through the back office and I'm seeing that our daughter play in the pool while we're doing 90 minutes of live coverage of a school shooting in Uvalde. It's real, right? And how do you drop your kid off at a school environment where at least it feels like that might be the most unsafe part of their day? Now, statistically, that's not entirely true, but it certainly feels like it. We have a chance. Let's just follow the news this week and see if this race comes out as close as it seems. But we are winning elections that are forcing change, and that's what you're a part of.
I believe I'm here not for policy, but for winning, okay? And you said it yourself, we don't have enough Democrats to win, so this is all about, I hope that we agree, running a moderate campaign, running one that's similar to Governor Beshear or Governor Kelly, and I really hope that that's the tone we take. I hope that you go to, and so I guess my questions are, can you please do town halls with Republicans only, with independents only? Can you please go on Fox News? Walk down the street to Psycho Newsmax and do some interviews. I'm serious. I truly believe that's how these elections will ever get won, especially in this state. Will you criticize Democrats who deserve it? Will you compliment DeSantis when he deserves it? It's happened like once or twice. It's happened. These are just things that I just want to win. Yeah, I don't want to talk about like anything else. Because we know if you get elected, you'll do all the things you've been saying. Your ideas are great, but honestly, I don't even care what your ideas are. I just want to win. Don't give it to me.
Yeah. I love this question.
Anyway, that's coming from someone who puts his money and his time where his mouth is.
Good.
I'm sure we'll be at Greg's house doing a fundraiser
Okay.
at some point.
All right. I love this question. You're talking to somebody who was a lifelong Republican, who spent 6 years as an independent, and who is today a proud Democrat. And the way we win is we talk to all three of those groups, okay? I'm gonna start with the ask, and then I'm gonna tell you how we win. Here's the ask I am begging of you folks, and I know this is tricky for me to say this as the only candidate in the race right now. We have to unify the Democratic primary right now. Right now. I am not saying we shouldn't have family conversations and you all shouldn't push me. I sat with a group of young socialists in St. Petersburg last week. I'm doing a town hall in Milton, Florida next week, which is about a 90% red community, okay? All right? I've been to the Villages 4 times. I've been to Pensacola 3 times. I've had a town hall on the steps of the Collier County Courthouse in Naples, and somebody stood up and said, "Thank you for remembering that a Democratic vote in Collier County counts the same as a Democratic vote in Broward County." Look, but I'm telling you this, I promise you this, folks, we cannot have a 2018 circular firing squad where Democrats train their sights on each other through next August. Republicans are about to do that. When I talk about the 3 values, the economy should work for everyone, the government should serve its people, and everyone should be welcome, every Democrat should be able to agree with that. If you're a socialist Democrat of America, if you're a conservative Democrat, if you're an MPA or a Republican, argue with me about those values, you can't. So let's unify around those values now, and let's hold the litmus test to Republicans. We have to win. And so that means having conversations, going to places we haven't succeeded in the past. I have to sit with the faith community and say, I believe our values better align with the teachings of faith. All faiths, the basics, love, joy, dignity, respect, whatever it might be. Where we have lost before, we have to lose by less. I have to go to the gun community, have the conversation we discussed. I have to go to the ag community and say, your labor markets are tight. Your labor markets are tight because the governor is fighting culture and immigration and not fighting crime. And if we actually welcome the immigrant laborer, your labor markets will be back where you want them to be. We need to go into places where we've lost and we have to lose by less. But we have to commit as Democrats where we have won to win by more. We don't get to sit on the sidelines this cycle. We have a generational opportunity to win the governorship. I'll do my part throughout red communities and independent communities. I will go on the air and I will ask Republicans to defend why they are against excellence in education, why they are against reducing the cost of insurance, why they are against reducing gun violence. It's very much a Pete Buttigieg type response on those platforms. And yes, when we do that, you get an Andy Beshear in Kentucky, you get a Steve Bullock in Montana. That's how we win this race. I agree with you 1,000%. Thank you.
Hi. Yes, sir. When I talk to college students at the Breezeway at Florida Atlantic University, they may be progressive, they may be apolitical, but there's a very common response whenever I beckon them over to a table that has a big Democrat label on it. Oh, no, I'm not a Democrat. We live in a state where there is a 1.3 million voter registration deficit for Democrats compared to Republicans. And it's great that you're doing the rounds reaching conservative and NPA voters, but there is a huge untapped block of voters, not just young people, but people who feel like the system has left them behind. And one of the important solutions, in my opinion, is to have an exciting, even unusual campaign. What is your plan to become a household name in Florida by the time the election is here?
Yeah, listen, to ask you for your help. No, I mean that. Listen, I am going to take counsel and do everything I can to cross that bridge and get as close as the young voters as I can. I need your help leading halfway and meeting me as well, leading your colleagues, your contemporaries, to taking our message and understanding why it is best for their future, but where I get it wrong, to correct me. Look, my view of leadership is to lead standing shoulder to shoulder, not to lead out front. There'll be a time where leaders have to lead out front, but building a campaign, building a coalition means letting young people make me smarter. Sitting in the case, as I did with a room of young socialists who probably didn't agree with anything I said, but we left agreeing on the basic values and agreeing that if we have an opportunity to work together around those three values, that we'll accomplish a lot more than if we hand the governorship to Byron Donalds, right? I would also say on the voter registration thing, this is very important. As a leader of a student democratic group, part of your responsibility is to register voters. And that's where we're going to see a lot of it. I would venture to say we're not closing that gap this cycle, though. Okay? So let's not take our eye off the ball of winning the election by spending all of our time on voter registration. If you can get a student at FAU to understand our message and our values and agree to vote for us, that's what we want. It's better if they also agree to register to vote. But they don't have to register to vote for Jolly for governor, or to vote for a Democratic senator, or to vote for a Democratic congressional candidate, or a Democratic state legislators. They don't have to register as a Democrat to do that. And so part of that is recognizing that if we just talk to them about the most impactful thing to their life, the most impactful thing may not be their voter registration, but it certainly is who's setting policies that affect the economy that they're about to enter. But I promise you, Nick, you're going to hear from me. I need your help. And I'm gonna move this bigger than just young people and students right now. To unify the Democratic primary, I need your help in your community of influence as well. Whether it's a subject matter influence, whether it's a demographic influence, whether it's a regional influence, I need your help. A campaign is a coalition. The candidate's just one little piece of that. I need your help, and I would ask for your help tonight.
First of all, as the grandmother of FAU students and also school up in northern Florida, register the kids who are registered in other states. My grandkids were all registered in California, so they voted there. Okay, but their Democratic vote here would carry a lot more weight. So if you could, sir, he's not listening. Nick, register students from out of state. Register students who are registered somewhere else. As a independent who's been registered as such in 5 different states, I will say that you have to appeal to us, but you I just want to make sure that you understand that we're with you. I will tell you, my Republican acquaintances, they used to be friends, but now we're acquaintances, that they get stuck on a one policy thing, and it's abortion. And it doesn't matter whether you decide you're going to talk about it or not, or because it's divisive, etc. You're going to be asked. So I hope you have a good answer on that. That won't hurt you. And I don't think you should talk about my question before the election, but after you're elected, could you do anything to stop out-of-state donors from affecting our non-federal elections?
Oh, I'd love that second question. And I'm going to directly answer the first question as well. Look, we need radical campaign finance reform in the state of Florida. I spent Saturday at the University of Florida football game. They call it the swamp, but Tallahassee's the real swamp. It's the swampiest state capital in the country. I tried to lead some radical campaign finance reform in DC, and it ended me up on 60 Minutes, and I lost all my friends. But it was the right thing to do. Frankly, part of my journey, and this goes to the first question on reproductive freedom as well, part of my journey is I used to defend money of speech in politics. But once I started serving, I realized I'm actually for the public financing of campaigns. Get all the money out of politics, whether it's from the state of Florida or not. So, look, I'll work with Tina and Deborah and others to figure out a strong ethics, transparency, campaign finance reform package in Florida. Here's what I would tell you on reproductive freedom. I supported Amendment 4. I would support codifying the language of Amendment 4. I support the Roe and Casey framework. I support reproductive freedom, and I would be the first pro-choice governor in the state of Florida in decades. I very quickly, because I know this may have been on Tina's list as well, and this is a very important conversation, folks. Change is part of my political journey. For those of you who followed one of my predecessors, Governor Charlie Crist, he used to say, "I didn't leave the party left me." Yeah. That was his story. Take it or leave it. That's not my story. My story is I left the party. I changed. I grew. As I served and I faced questions about the impact of legislation on individuals and communities, I changed on a lot of issues. And so on reproductive freedom, the very brief conversation here, because it's such an important one for this room and for my candidacy, when I got to Congress, it was the first time I had ever been elected to office, I know now, and I learned as I was serving, I started by wrongly applying my teachings of faith to a constitutional question. I got it wrong early on. I was wrong. As I served and I realized the impact of conservative Republican dogma on reproductive freedom and on access to reproductive care, I started to realize that I needed to change, that I needed to change my mind and my positions. I don't think that's a bad thing. I think that's a good thing. I test a different question in politics. Is it okay to change your mind? Because I did. And so in Congress, I became the only Republican to vote against the Planned Parenthood investigation. When Republicans moved to completely defund Planned Parenthood, I offered legislation that said if we're defunding Planned Parenthood, let's at least move the $400 million to community health centers so that there can be a continuation of care in underserved communities. Now look, in politics, if you stand in the middle of the road, you get run over, okay? Republicans didn't want me, Democrats didn't need me, and what I later learned is that legislation to at least move the money to community health centers was not good enough. That was part of my journey of learning. I soon got to the place where I became a defender of the Roe Casey framework, that it was rightly decided to protect bodily autonomy, reproductive freedom, that the government had an interest in balancing the state's interest in the viability of a fetus, but that we start with protecting the individual freedom to make decisions about their own body. I defend reproductive freedom now. It's not a new premise. I've done that for the past 5 or 6 years. I did vote for Amendment 4, and I would fight to enact Amendment 4. That's not where I was 10 years ago, and I'm honest about that journey. And the reason I tell that story is because politics gets really dirty. And it's easy to represent where I was 10 or 15 years ago and to somehow suggest that that should be a fallibility. I think my change is a strength, and I would ask you to consider that as well.
My name is Michael Gomez. I'm with the president of the Palm Beach County High School Democrats, who are all the way in the back.
How about it?
Here to help. So, like what Nick said before me, we're here to help you in any way we can in between classes after we finish our homework, to help you campaign and you succeed. But our chapter encompasses both a lot of public school kids and a lot of private school kids across the county. Now, recently, with the Florida Congress, we have seen the undermining of the public school system in multiple cases, from the proposition of Senate Bill 116, from the school voucher program, which we touched on a little bit, from the strengthening of PragerU, and all these different actions from the Florida Congress, from DeSantis, to undermine our system. How you work to help our system become more strong and help our students succeed in the future.
Yeah, so since we're sticking with lightning rounds, it starts with a governor getting out of the classroom and saying, let teachers teach and bring back the books, okay? I'm guessing we have educators or retired educators in the room today who spent their life and career doing it, and they are experts at that craft and at that vocation, and I am not. And neither is Ron DeSantis, and neither is his wife, forgive me. So let teachers teach. Trust teachers how to cultivate excellence out of a student and work with them to determine what opportunities they want in life, whether it's academics or trades or culture or arts or whatever it might be. That's true in our public school environment where they need more resources, and that's true in our private school environments where those requirements aren't on our private schools. Look, the language this cycle on education might be a little different. Choice is here to stay. Most public administrators will tell you that. Choice is here to stay. But if we strengthen the requirements, the outcome requirements on our voucher schools, we increase their performance for Florida's families, and we actually root out the underperforming voucher schools, just like Republicans have tried to do in our public schools. There is a way to do this that elevates and lifts up students from all walks of life.
Thank you.
Hi, first of all, thank you for coming tonight. It's amazing, thank you. My question is in regards to, I want you to win. And I'm very, very concerned about election integrity. And I have Bob Woodward's book, Rage, about Trump's first term, pretty much proved that the Russians interfered in at least 2 counties in Florida. And now I've seen a ton of data, which is reflecting not just Florida, but many states, but definitely in Florida. It's like a slam dunk for how the votes were tabulated. So much foul play. Not even funny. There will be a lawsuit. And my concern is, special elections, I feel like we're seeing the true temperature. We see what's really happening. They cannot get away with it in the special election. The midterms, I am very, very, very worried about that. And the numbers that I understand is that he had a 1 in octillion chance of winning the way that he did. That's 17 zeros. No way. There's no way. He wasn't shot. He didn't win. He's on the list. So with that, boom, yeah, think. What could you do, in your position right now? I don't know, what any of you can do, but is there something we can do to have transparency in how our votes are counted, so we know they're being counted?
Yeah, one, the answer is win big. Seriously, win big is the number one way we can do this. 2, your county supervisors of election are actually the real administrators of election integrity, and can be trusted and should be trusted with very few exceptions. 3rd, the courts are really going to be the only remedy, because the political process, I agree with you, they're going to do whatever they can. My biggest fear that what we're going to see nationally is sometime next summer they'll start launching investigations to all the leading Democratic candidates across the country. That's a real issue. But we go back to the 3 ways: win big, work with your county supervisor of election at the local level, and then be ready to go to court.
Thank you.
Yep. Yes, ma'am.
I'm also with the Palm Beach County High School Democrats. I have another question about education. My sister is a teacher at a Title I elementary school. Almost every single student she has is a child of an immigrant who has come here this year, who can't speak English, who can't add, who can't read, but they are being pushed past through these grades, and they still can't because of the education policies. And I'm just wondering what you're willing to do to help these children of immigrants who are not being prepared for success.
Yeah, so listen, we need to put in charge of the State Board of Education someone who understands education and teaching kids, okay? Seriously, I mean, every other field, we rely on experts for outcomes, whether it's medicine or law or transportation. For some reason in public policy, we don't do that in education under Republicans. Why don't we consider doing that? Now, I think money doesn't solve everything, but money solves a lot, okay? So if the problem is we have students being left behind, we have students who don't know English, we have to serve an underserved immigrant population, and yet our current education policy just continues to push these people along until they drop out of school. The ability to have more teachers, to have more professionals able to intervene, to be able to spend more time with children, to be able to provide additional platforms, all of those increase the qualitative outcomes for the child. But when we have defunded public education and that teacher who a job used to require 3 professionals, now it's been consolidated into 1. Now they're being told what they can and can't do as a teacher, whether or not they can exercise their profession, and that kid gets moved along simply out of a matter of efficiency. That's creating the pipeline that's causing the problems. Look, we can choose how we spend our revenue. I mentioned the tourist development tax money. Maybe it's for insurance, maybe it's for education. I think wherever we identify the revenue and put the question in front of voters, we need a 10-year renaissance in public education funding in the state of Florida that is locked in for the next 10 years to address performance metrics.
Hello, my name is Riley. I'm 17, so next year your election will be the first time I'm voting. I'm very excited. I'm also on the board of the Palm Beach County High School Democrats, and I'm entering my 2nd year on Congressman Jared Moskowitz's Congressional Youth Cabinet. So I'm very politically active. I've also had family members who have served in the military before, and I wanted to ask about what your role is in helping our veterans get their rightful benefits from the VA, and especially with affecting their mental health, having PTSD, and other physical disabilities. I feel like it's such a big issue, especially with homelessness as well. I feel like our veterans are serving hard for our country, especially having a problem recruiting people to even serve, and then for them to come home with these disabilities, both mental and physical. So kind of what you're gonna do about getting them their rightful benefits and helping them with housing.
Yeah, so it's a great question. When I was in Congress, I served on the Veterans Affairs Committee as well as the Veterans Fund, the committee that funds all of our VA activities. And to the earlier question about complimenting DeSantis where we've gotten things right, look, Florida has largely been a very veterans-friendly state, and I think that's a good thing. Our investment in the Florida National Guard, we have an excellent National Guard here in the state of Florida. However, I do think the federal cuts are having an impact on our veteran community. And one of the things I'm concerned about when it comes to cuts to FEMA, cuts to veterans benefits, frankly, cuts to the Social Security Administration, is that we may actually have to be one of the first states that steps up and funds a State Department of VA navigators or of Social Security Administration navigators. What does that mean? What does that look like? Veterans benefits are largely federal benefits for health care and other monthly benefits. But when we cut the access points, when there are delays in having those VA benefits approved because DOGE and the federal government has cut the funding for our VA offices, the state of Florida may have to step in and say, we're actually going to fund professional navigators for federal VA benefits to provide assistance to Florida's veterans to more quickly and more efficiently access the benefits they're entitled to. Look, I think Florida's done a lot in being a veteran-friendly state. There's a lot more we can do.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for coming. I've also been in politics for a while and worked on many, many campaigns. Florida's usually always won by like 1% of the vote. What's your plan on getting out the vote and organizing? Because that's going to be your key to winning.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that. I think this is an election cycle where we can win. As I mentioned, I have to be a candidate. We have to be a campaign that is in parts of the state where Democrats, I think, have underperformed or not tried to go. That means the deep red pockets we have to go to. That means in the blue areas, we actually have to excite the base. And that's where I need help. I need help, right? We need everything to work this cycle to pull off the win. Fortunately, this is an environment where we're seeing it. I accept responsibility for turning out the vote we need to win.
Thank you very much for coming, and it's more of a comment that I have with the right to choose. unfortunately, and the millions of Americans like myself who are in favor of the right to choose, we've been labeled like we're pro-abortion, okay? And for the younger people, Nick, I don't understand the younger people. There's more at stake for them than myself being an 83-year-old guy as far as climate change. I may not have to worry about climate change too much, but the young people do. And we have to get that message to them. And so what about gun control? Or I shouldn't say gun control, it's always reform. Gun reform. But how dare they? That's up to a young man and a young woman to make that choice. So I hope that when you're going to be asked this question, that you immediately tell them I am more probably pro-life than this other side. We're the pro-lifers with the people getting killed with guns. Why aren't they in favor of gun reform, all right? Why are they in favor of climate change that are killing so many people too? But they have this there, and how about the ones that say, yeah, no, have that baby, and then they don't take care of the baby. So these are big issues. But please don't get into that. We're all into this trap.
I agree.
I'm pro-abortion because I'm a right to choose. That's lousy. That's my point.
Thank you for that. Look, I would say in a very Buddha judge way, it requires constructively attacking the fail points of their arguments, right? On guns, when I said, you tell me, Republicans, how you're going to save a life, because right now I haven't heard you say that. I haven't heard an answer from Republicans. And frankly, on reproductive freedom, I don't have a problem going to the faith-based pro-life community and saying, you want to own this issue because it's a religious tenet. Throw away the crutch of relying on government to enact laws where you have failed to evangelize. It empowers your faith to actually take ownership of this. The role of the Constitution and the government is to protect the freedom of everybody to practice however they wish to practice. We have to have different conversations.
So my name is Athena, and yeah, I'm here about 3 years from the greater Boston area, but been very involved here in Boca Raton. My question to you is not only just the state, because I'm so excited to have you win the state, David, but how do you partner with other governors as well on gun reform? Because it's not just here in Florida, because the guns will come to Florida, even if we have fantastic laws, right? So it's really partnering with other governors as well to make this more of a national reformation.
Look, I agree fully with that, and here's a bit of optimism I will give you. I have very good relationships with many of the leading Democratic governors across the country, and though we do not have public endorsements yet, I think you will see a real strength for our Florida candidacy for the governorship with the likes of Shapiro and Pritzker and Bashir and others, because these are national issues. And the more blue states we can count, the better we get to change the direction of the nation. Here's the hope I will give you as we conclude here. I know we can win this race, and I'm going to ask that you believe we can win the race too. I think you already do. That's why you're here. But here's something I want to tell you. I'm going to give you the stretch goal, right? And all of our work in life, we have our goal and then we have our stretch goal if things go really well. Let me give you the stretch goal that is immediately reached when we win this race. When Florida's voters, not David Jolly, when Florida's voters win and demand change next November, the road to the White House in 2028 runs through our state. I want you to think about this. Take me out of the equation altogether. Make this about if Florida's voters, after 30 years of Republican control, in the state where the president lives and where Ron DeSantis has had one of the strongest grips of any MAGA governor, if Florida's voters reject MAGA and go blue next November, the entire country comes through Florida in 2028. That's what we're doing here tonight. Thank you all very much. I appreciate it.